and it was Waller, and I'll never forget the constable that had me arrested and taken to the Hudson Avenue police station. I'd never been in a police station. Didn't call my parents, but they called the police. Now, I was a little outspoken. I think I was a little educated because I didn't come out of the South Side. I was from the North Side. But when they brought the other black children to Waller, I looked just like they did. I grew up in Old Town. I went to Immaculate Conception, and I was taught by Dominican nuns. When I first got my opportunity to cross division, where the majority of the black children were, they said, "You sound like you're white." I didn't know I was black until I was 10 years old. I was in a white community. I don't know how my father got that property, but I grew up on North Avenue in Orleans, and there were no other blacks north of Division Street when I was a child. I remember the first family that came in the north, they moved in on Wells Street, Wells and North Avenue. And all of my experiences, because of my dialect, because of my education at Immaculate Conception, I was kind of privileged. When I got into a situation, I sound good. I was raised, my mother said she had us become Catholics because she liked the way the children lined up. That's why we became Catholic. And we were very disciplined with rulers, you name it, they got you in line. But I'm really glad to be here. I don't want to take up all the airtime, but racism in Chicago, they call it hidden racism. Just being here in this group, this is an educated group. The problem is not with the educated, it's with the children that are not educated. And as long as we keep boycotting the situation and making the schools on the South Side, on the black side of the South Side, disappear, we're going to have big problems all the time.
Fanny Rushing, a previous community organizer for the 63 Boycott. So if we could keep these introductions brief so we can get to Q&A.
5 minutes, because I know that no souls are saved after the first 15. I think it is important to talk about Freedom Day 1, October 22nd, but it's more important to talk about Freedom Day 2 because of the success of Freedom Day 1, because 250,000 students were in the street, not organized by any one group, but certainly the masses. You saw the pictures of black, brown, and certainly some white students who were in the street. But those students were organized by a wide range of people, one of them sitting next to me. And so I don't want to take up a lot of time because you really need to hear what Rosie Simpson has to say about organizing, because she was in the forefront of that movement. But I want to talk for just a minute about Freedom Day 2, February 22nd, 1964. It was by that time that Ben Willis had, for the first time in the history of the United States, he had security guards because the black community was so enraged by his intransigence that Daley decided that he had to be protected. And not having driven him from office, as was the plan at that time, another school boycott was planned for February 22nd. And that's when the screws went on. That's when we found out about surveillance. And you can read the FBI reports. You can see the way the questions began to change. Because there was a movement not only in the South, but also in the North. James Baldwin had said it was the fire next time. Malcolm X had raised the question of whether or not nonviolence was the only way. And that was a real concern. The Chicago Urban League, just like the National Urban League, had been concern to mediate, to stop radicalism from developing. It is interesting to see Bill Berry portrayed in the way that he was portrayed tonight. Bill Berry being brought into the Chicago Urban League because Sidney Williams and Earl B. Dickerson were much too radical for the Urban League. But the people's movement was powerful enough to move Bill Berry to another position. Another position. You didn't hear the voice of Larry Landry, who was the head of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in Chicago, who was arguing for the continuance of the fight until Bill Willis was out of office. And that's what Freedom Day 2 was all about. And so there weren't 250,000, but there were 180,000 students in the street on February 22nd, 1964, when Daley and the school board had done everything that they could to destroy the movement that produced those boycotts. But the people were victorious, and ultimately in 1966, Ben Willis was driven out of office. He was driven out of office because of the power of the people. Those people need to be organized again, but we have to really understand the nature of that history and the nature of that struggle in order to be successful in it.
Do a little extension thing.
Either that, I can move. No, you're good.
So this is Rosie Simpson, a former parent of the 63 boycott.
I'm not going to talk too long because what I have to say to take in terms of organizing and how the movement around fourth education and the parents and the students got involved would take more time than we have tonight. So that, but as one of the parents in an area where there was an all Willis wagon school they were building, we had to go to extremes. And so I was one of the ones who sat in front of bulldozers, laid and organized the parents around that. However, and I did organize for TWO. I was organizing for TWO, and I did work for the League. And so, and I was part of the coordinating council for community organization. We were, or the parents, the movement came from the parents. I don't care what you think, it came from the community. Parents were upset about what was going on in the school system. Yeah, my kids were going to school half a day. They didn't have the kind of equipment in the schools that they should have. There were empty classrooms, and we got our information. The Urban League was instrumental in giving us information as to where the empty classrooms were, and all of those kinds of things. So we had the information, and we knew what we were doing, but the main thing was that you have to get the parents of the kids involved. And you had that movement all over the city. You had parents sitting in all over on the west side, Vanetta Howell, Barrett, and Jean Lewis. You got a whole host of unsung hero women. Hattie Williams, who's deceased now, in Oakwood Boulevard. And Chatham Avalon, Billy Page, and just a whole host of people. Connie Seal, Mary, you could go down, but they were parents. And they were organizing around their schools. They were sitting in, they were boycotting. So when the time came for the coordinating council to call for a citywide boycott, people were ready to do it. And so that the coordinating council for community organization at that time, and I'll let Tim tell you about that, because he can tell you more about it. He was a part of the coordinating council for community organization.
The first thing I have to say is these two young ladies sitting to the side of me are like my younger sisters. And they have been a part of trying to bring about change most of their young lives. I'll go back a little bit, because I'm not going to get into any of the details, I know too many of them. But just to give a history on a personal level, I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, December 7, 1918. And the story goes, this is old Birmingham, the South that has been described in some of the play parts of this evening. In that part of the world, you couldn't vote unless you took a chance on men of getting killed. My dad would take that chance, and my mom was scared about him all the time. There were others like him. And so the story goes that when I was 8 months old, looking around in Birmingham in that period, I said to my mom, "Shucks, I'm leaving here." And my mom said to my dad, "This boy getting ready to leave here, and he doesn't even know I changed his diaper, but I'm going with him." So I brought my family here when I was 8 months old. Now, the basic purpose was of people who left like that for their children to have the opportunity to vote, to be able to have parents, and to get a quality education for their children. And that was one of the things that we were seeking all through my young life, up to adulthood, and into this period that can be, I don't know how you describe it. But the point is, if we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal, why then, at this point in our history, years and years later, we find African Americans still at the bottom of the educational system? What is the reason for that? Well, coming from the background that I come from, I take it that race does matter. If you can put it on race solely, then by using educational tools, you can keep all of them out. But if you find them and their friends aggressive like my daddy and others like him and others like many people from this neighborhood, Bill Corn and so forth, that believe in the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, then because we believe in the nature of the nation itself, we're going to prove that all people are created equal. We're going to prove it. We're going to use the one tool that can make all of them equal, regardless of the color of their skin, but to the access to those things that will give equality to all people, not just men. Now, blacks epitomize in this kind of system. One has to look at why would they do that. To keep some group at the bottom of the system, it's easier if you do it by color. In the United States, in other places they do it by creed, by class. In India they did it by caste, and some places by gender. But it's easy to do it if you can pull all the people. And then if you can pull a few people of that group into the mainstream, you can then say, see, color doesn't matter. While then you begin to close up, or you then begin to deprive the schools where the colored are, so that they will not be fully equipped to get into the mainstream, and then you can say they're just dumb. What I see happening today, and what we fought against in bringing the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education decision in the Supreme Court, and I was a teacher in the public schools when Bill Willis was brought into the system specifically to keep the schools segregated. Who was he brought in by? Not just the mayor, but those who had made, not the mayor, because the black folks made the mayor kind of back in 1955 when he was elected, and see who would have been elected had not the black turnout been so great. But almost immediately, he betrayed that turnout, and that was people. And then the merchants on State Street, the State Street merchants went to the mayor and told him that he must get a new superintendent because the one that he had was an integrationist. And if the schools became integrated, then the white folk would leave the city and the merchants, the State Street corridors and all of those places would begin to fade away. Immediately, the superintendent of that period was dismissed, and Willis was deliberately brought in for the purpose. We began to organize around Willis, the Willis wagons, overcrowded, students going to schools, jam-packed, on almost day shifts, 2 shifts, 3 shifts, while in adjacent communities, there were empty classrooms, but keeping that community. And then, because of the lack of time, those students were not getting the education that would make them competitive in the bigger world. Now, I was in World War II, 4 battle stars and the Croix de Guerre. I saw Buchenwald and places like that. I remember when Hiroshima was bombed, and I was wondering, why would we do that to a people? So I advise you young people, and all of you are younger than me, so don't be saying you're not, that if this world is to be the kind of world that you want to live in, if this nation is going to be the kind of place that you can brag about, if Chicago is going to be the kind of place that everyone would like to live, education, quality education for all of our children, black, brown, Catholic, Jewish, whoever, the quality of education will give them a chance to move into the bigger world. If you don't do that, the struggle will continue. Thank you very much.
Thank our panelists once again. If you give another round of applause, please. Unfortunately, we are out of time. We are way past time, and we will not have time for Q&A. But the panelists will be here for a while. If you would like to come up and meet them and greet them and ask them questions personally, you can do so. But I want to thank everybody for coming out once again to the opening event of Free Minds, Free People. Don't forget to register at Uplands High School tomorrow morning. Also, if anyone needs to get back to downtown and you're going to take the number 6 bus and need to know how to walk there, I personally will also be taking the number 6 bus, so you can look for me here in the corner outside of the church and we can walk together. Also, if anybody wants to give people who are here from the conference, out-of-towners, a ride downtown, if you can please, raise your hand. Anybody here who has a car and is willing to give people rides? Okay?
If you have a car, could you meet me over in this corner over here? And if you need a ride, also meet me over in that corner.
Okay, so people with cars can meet over here in this corner. If you need a ride, you can link up with people who have cars and can give you a ride to a hotel or where you're staying. Thank you so much for coming out. I really appreciate you all coming out today. Let's give everybody a round of applause once again. Thank you.